During a debate on the nomination of controversial Senator Jeff Sessions to become the next Attorney General, Senator Elizabeth Warren attempted to read from a letter. And that letter was originally sent back in the late 80s by Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., when she was opposing Jeff Sessions from becoming a federal judge back then. Now, he did not get that position, in part because of what she said in her letter. So Elizabeth Warren decided to bring that back up for his next nomination battle. She tried to, but wasn't successful, as you'll see in this video.
They are mothers, daughters, sisters, fathers, sons, and brothers.
Mr. President.
They are...
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
The senators impugn the motives and conduct of our colleague from Alabama as warned by the chair. Senator Warren, quote, said Senator Sessions has used the awesome power of his office to chill the free exercise of the vote by black citizens. I call the senator to order under the provisions of Rule 19.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Massachusetts.
Mr. President, I am surprised that the words of Coretta Scott King are not suitable for debate in the United States Senate. I ask leave of the Senate to continue my remarks.
Is there objection?
Object.
I appeal the ruling.
Objection is heard. The senator will take her seat.
Ooh, that's
no,
man.
That
Don't,
last
not
part.
that way, no. And then a little bit afterward, and we're going to return to some of the reactions to what happened to her. A little bit afterward, Mitch McConnell said something to the effect of she was warned, she received an explanation, and yet she persisted. And so that has become a hashtag that's going around with photos of other women who stood up against, in many cases, harsher strike back for what they were attempting to do. But don't tell her to take her seat. Don't do that.
So, okay, when I first saw a little bit of this, they were talking about the Rule 19. And so the two people that were defending this move by Mitch McConnell were saying, well, you guys, she obviously broke the rules, and she was warned about it, and she continued to break the rule. You break the rules, you suffer the consequences. These people who didn't, I mean, it's a cursory search. I was like, oh, I've never heard of Rule 19, mostly because it's rarely used, and it's been used 3 times in history, something like that. I'm sure you'll get to that. But before you go and just try and go straight to jumping to your sides, think about what's happening. Look it up. You don't have to be a scholar, a constitutional scholar, or a historian to know anything that's going on here. Just look it up. I looked up and read it for 3 to 7 seconds, and I was like, oh, that sounds like bullshit.
It sounds weird that they're bringing that up, yeah.
Well, it's weird in this context because it was a rule that came up in, or was created in, I think it was like 1907?
1902.
1902, so even earlier than that. And it was because 2 senators got into a debate that resulted to fisticuffs.
Yeah.
And so...
like Japan or Turkey these days.
A little different, right? I mean, in this case, what is the point of having a Senate hearing if you're not allowed to challenge or criticize some of the past behavior of a nominee?
I don't know. I found her move to be aggressive and violent. I remember back, a guy wanted to meet me behind the bleachers, and then he read a threatening letter at me, and I was like, no.
Sounds like you behaved like a snowflake.
It did seem like it. I am Mitch McConnell these days. So she was, of course, defended. Many of the senators tweeted out saying she should be allowed to read the letter. Eventually, other senators did read the letter, and it's available in its entirety online if you want to read it. But we have a little bit of video of Bernie Sanders speaking out in support of Elizabeth Warren on this issue.
But I also want to express my very strong opposition to Senator McConnell's effort to deny Senator Elizabeth Warren the opportunity to express her point of view. And there are 2 separate issues. Number one, this is the United States Senate, and the American people expect from us a vigorous debate on the important issues facing this country. The idea that a letter and a statement made by Coretta Scott King, the widow of Martin Luther King Jr., at the United States, a letter that she wrote, could not be presented and spoken about here on the floor of the Senate is, to me, incomprehensible. And anyone who knows anything about Coretta Scott King understands this is not a vicious woman This is not a woman who was engaged in personal attacks. This is a woman who stood up and fought for civil rights, for dignity, for justice, for her whole life. And yet, when Senator Warren read her statement, she was told that she could no longer participate in this debate over Senator Sessions' nomination, which I regard as an outrage.
This is constant, I'm sorry, dude. This is constant proof of the use of historical civil rights figures, Martin Luther King being the only one that many people even know existed in history, as using them for your own purposes, and then once their words and many of their sentiments come to light about this isn't about Jeff Sessions' grandfather, this is about Jeff Sessions, the same guy who's up for trying to get confirmed again now. This is what Coretta Scott King said. So once it doesn't work for you, it's offensive, and it's impugning it's unworthy or becoming of a senator's character to read what a civil rights leader's wife, who was also a civil rights leader, said in 1986 about the same guy.
The same guy.
So whenever we wonder, if Martin Luther King was still around today, how would they treat him? Would they be exalting him the way they do to use for their own purposes? That's the only reason they exalt him, by the way. The answer is yes. This is what they would do to him. They'd say, someone sit that old man down. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a racist, and he's riling up race relations in the country. He's dividing our country along racial lines. Get him out of here. That's what they would say about Martin Luther King.
Well, and it's ridiculous, both because, as you said, historically it's only been used a few times. The last time apparently was back in 1979, and we could go through the list of all of the offensive things that have been said, impugning the motives of senators. And so it's ridiculous in that it's only being used now and not in cases that were far worse. But also, it's intended so that when you're having a debate about coal or something, me and Anna are debating about coal, and I call her the C word and she calls me a bastard. We're not supposed to be having that sort of impugning.
Right.
He's up for a position. If you're saying he can't be criticized, then what's the point of having the debate in the first place?
Yeah, there's no
and I'm sure
point
Mitch
at all.
McConnell doesn't want that debate to be there. We know in the end, they're going to get, regardless of how extreme their nominees are, they're going to get them. They got Betsy DeVos, someone who is completely unqualified for her position, so why shouldn't they get a guy as Attorney General who's opposed to equal rights for African Americans and gay Americans and that sort of thing? They're going to get him. We just want a little bit of debate beforehand. The ability for the opposition party to at least make clear they don't support this guy before he runs roughshod over the rights of Americans.
They don't want people to know the reasons why there's opposition to this nominee. They don't want that information out there for people to consume and go, who'd you guys confirm again? They'd rather have that all shut down.
It's going to backfire, too, because obviously it's generated a ton of memes and a ton of focus on Elizabeth Warren. It raises her profile and standing. And so they temporarily tried to silence her, but in the end, they just amplified her message.
And again, in this case, it wasn't even about calling names or, devolving into a petty insult. It was about reading a letter from Coretta Scott King in regard to the very person that they're having the Senate hearing on. So take everything into consideration, consider the whole situation in context. If you genuinely care about these hearings, being highly critical of people who are going to be in huge positions of power, well, then you should be outraged at what happened to Elizabeth Warren.
We are the watchers on the wall. We are the sword in the darkness. Come join us. tytnetwork.com/join.